The next question, the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Premier. It is the responsibility of this House and all members to raise matters of public interest and importance. It is our responsibility to seek to end injustice and to debate policies, but on Indigenous policy we have been silent for far too long. It is past time that we create a standing committee on Indigenous relations in this House, a standing committee where Indigenous peoples may be heard, policies examined and deliberated, and solutions found. Speaker, we cannot be silent any longer. I've called upon the Premier to act and create a standing committee on Indigenous relations, for without honest, ongoing and respectful discussions from all sides, the mantra of reconciliation is empty and hollow.
The Minister of Indigenous Affairs to reply on behalf of the government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston for the motion that he tabled this morning. I understand it will be debated at second reading on March 5th, and I look forward to reviewing it in some detail and getting some reflections and input from all members of this place, and in particular from my Indigenous critic on the content of what he's put forward. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that this government at every turn, as I mentioned in a previous response, has taken the opportunities, Mr. Speaker, available to us to work directly with Indigenous communities on major policy positions, Mr. Speaker, and economic development, and we continue to be hopeful that this relationship will be ongoing. We've had Indigenous leadership host proactive receptions here, Mr. Speaker, to build relationships. And we hope that moving forward, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to make all of these opportunities with Indigenous communities and leaderships a top priority with this government. Thank you.
The supplementary question.
Again to the Premier, and I appreciate the Minister's response, but I believe the supplementary is deserving of a response from the Premier. The people of Ontario expect their government to uphold the rule of law. They understand there are inequities and strains in our relationship with Indigenous peoples. The conflation of facts and opinions that surround this relationship make it difficult for everyone, Native and non-Native alike, to have honest discussions and debates. I've asked today that the Premier create a standing committee on Indigenous relations. It is overdue. The committee must have the discretion to investigate related matters and report back to this House for open debate. It is not my ballot day on March 5th, Minister. We can do this by unanimous consent today. Thank you.
Minister to reply.
Mr. Speaker, regardless of the specific date, I think the official opposition and the Indigenous critic would have some important things to say. There's a preamble here as I look at the motion or the letter in its content. But, Mr. Speaker, some of the subject matter, I think, could and should be discussed. Indigenous land claims. This government is moving at the fastest pace that I can recall in federal time and provincial to settle those land claims. Indigenous impact benefit agreements. Mr. Speaker, we've moved forward on a number of key legacy infrastructure opportunities with Indigenous communities all across Northern Ontario. The development of resources on Native lands. The Ministry of Natural Resources through dealing with the Far North Act directly with Indigenous leadership, Mr. Speaker. Education and curriculum. We move forward with reciprocal education policies and embedded, Mr. Speaker, Indigenous history mandatorily in the curriculums of elementary and in secondary students, Mr. Speaker. So these are all important subject matter, and we'll look.
Thank you very much.